Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show with me, Andrew Willett. We're in the midst of WNBA coverage and excited to bring our content to you. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Without further ado, a pro basketball show. Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show. Today we are 4 weeks into the season. It's kind of hard to believe that a month of basketball has passed, but I am joined by none other than Aryeh Schwartz. Aryeh, thank you so much for joining me. We've had kind of an insane month of basketball. I was just telling Rachel Gallatin, nonetheless, that while I was doing the FIBA tournament that I'm covering, that I am a huge fan of all of the work that you guys do over there. Love and appreciate all that you do over at Winsidr, covering the W. This is the host and the founder of Winsidr, Aryeh. Thank you so much for joining the show. How are you?
It's an honor to be here. First of all, shout out to you for covering those FIBA games all over. What is it? U16?
Yep.
Okay.
U16.
Yeah, Rachel's always like, you got to check out this 15-year-old random country, insert random position. She's amazing. And I'm just like, Rachel, let me know in 5 years when I can start conceptualizing it all. But yeah, like you said, it's been, honestly, I did not realize it's been 4 weeks until you just said that. So cool. All right, let's go.
Yeah, right. It's crazy that we've had that much basketball, and I think there's a lot that we can take away from it. Well, at the same time, it feels like not much time has passed. There's still so much time left for teams to make adjustments. We know we'll see so many adjustments, but a month is a pretty good sample size for us to start taking things away from. So I just right away, what are your takeaways from early in the season?
I would say the real, less than a takeaway, more of a theme. So I'm gonna switch up your question here.
I like it.
Takeaways are tough because it's I can't make a whole takeaway for everybody in the league, right? There's 12 different teams. They're all going through their own variety of issues or successes and whatnot. But the main theme for me is we've heard so much talk of super teams, and honestly, they call me a hater, whatever. I'm over it. We don't need more super team talk, and I'm fine. I'm happy that it's happening. Whatever, cool. We've had it before. But for me, the flip side of it is, if you're a GM in this league, you look around at the makeup of the league and you go, okay, realistically, if I'm Seattle, Minnesota, LA, Chicago, although Chicago's been doing crazy, Atlanta, Indiana, we're not winning a championship. We're aware of that. If we do, great. And obviously that's the ultimate goal of every season, but realistically, you kind of you have that dream goal, we're going to win the championship. And then you have those realistic goals. What's a successful season? And for a lot of these teams, sorry, fan bases, it's to lose. And I'm not saying they should tank. I think tanking takes on this whole term of lose every game, play as bad as you possibly can. No. Because first of all, players don't tank. Players are, and the theme in my mind is players getting chances to make an impact on this league and solidify a long-term position in this league. I look at Minnesota, I look at LA and Seattle, and heck, even Chicago. And there's a lot of players on the roster that if those teams were legitimately competing for a championship, they wouldn't be on the roster. And that's not shade. That's not anything bad. You see teams gambling on players that necessarily wouldn't be on the roster. And so for me, the theme of this season, having so many teams in that position is, and I view it in a positive light of these players have an opportunity. You're signed for the season. Maybe you don't last the whole season, but right now you're signed for the season or you're on a hardship. You have an opportunity in the hardest league in the world to make a roster, to actually get playing time, show why you should be in this league, and make a case for why next offseason, when you're a free agent, most likely a lot of them will be, you can get picked up by a team. And maybe you won't be a starter on that team like you are now, or you won't be getting as many minutes. But you look at a player like Sydney Colson, who has never been an established star in this league. but has found a way to consistently find a roster spot and stay in this league. And for all the talk of first round picks, second round picks getting cut, there's always those stories of those players that nobody expected to make a roster, but somehow stay on a team. And I think there's a lot to be said for it. So like for me, I know everyone wants me to hate on things, but like I'm looking at it a positive. Like there's a lot of players getting a chance to prove their worth and solidify a long-term career in this league.
And so, from the team's perspective, because we're going to get into power rankings today on this episode, but from the team's perspective, outside of those top two, three teams, it really is about giving a lot of potential, not only for the players, as you've been mentioning, but maybe this player can really get some time this year and step into something even better next year for the team. And that's a really interesting theme to find in this season, which I think has has had a lot of ups and downs, um, with some highs in the lead and some lows. But I think everyone has kind of found a way to compete with one another. I mean, Indiana has kind of stood out to me as a surprise. I wasn't too surprised about some of the teams at the top or the bottom, but genuinely, my biggest question mark heading into the next phase of the season was this cluster in the middle, when it goes from, in my opinion, like in Atlanta, Washington, and LA, all the way down to even in Indiana there before I get to some of the worst teams. So for you, what were some of your larger question marks at this point still in the season?
Honestly, like my biggest question marks, and I'll say this to kind of tease into what we'll talk about in a little bit with the power rankings. Like, I think there's 5 teams that could make an argument for winning a championship this year. And so I think that leaves 7 teams in that lower tier, not going to win it, not competing. And I'll let you think about who those are while I talk. But the biggest question marks for me this season are DC, New York, and Dallas. Like DC, I think there's no question roster wise, they have the talent to compete. It's all about, are they going to make offensive adjustments? Are they going to, like, to be blunt, they seem like a team that isn't driven to win it. They seem like a team that isn't trying to prove it. And we saw in the first game of the season, they destroyed New York. The post-game presser was just, we're underdogs. I don't know why people think we're underdogs, blah, blah. Like, that was what you wanted throughout the season, right? And it hasn't been that since that. Since that, it's been like a jalopy sputtering to like stay on the road, honestly. And like a lot of it comes down to the question marks of the coaching. A lot of it comes down to the question marks of the free agency moves during the offseason. Instead of looking, or instead of adding, I shouldn't say looking because I don't know, I'm not privy to those conversations, but instead of adding offensive firepower, which they knew they had a weakness in, they added an elite defender. Not really solving your problem. And the issues continue. And so, like, shout out to Brittany Sykes. Amazing player. She's a great two-way player, but she's not the type of offensive threat that this team needs. She checks a lot of the same boxes as an Ariel Atkins or a Natasha Cloud, or like, she's a player who thrives in the paint with her athleticism. She's like not an elite 3-point shooter. She's not an elite shooter. And so you're talking about Shakira Austin and Elena Del Don. So the paint's going to be a little bit crowded. You already have Natasha Cloud driving in the paint area. Like, you already have enough players who do that, and you add a great defender. So that's my questions for DC. And then New York, it's kind of like they seem a little bit too, I don't even know the right words. Like, they don't have that grit, that tenacity. They don't have that dog. Like, Rachel and I have been talking about it a lot. It's just, does Jonquel Jones want to put in the work in the paint and sacrifice her body? Because this team needs somebody who's going to be a physical paint presence, and they need Jonquel to do that. And honestly, it's something that slipped under the radar. I would say I questioned a variety of things about New York. The one thing I didn't think about was Jonquel Jones throughout her career has been paired with elite bigs and elite paint presence players in Alyssa Thomas and Bree Jones. And so now that you don't have those players who are well known in this league as being physically dominant in the paint, what happens to JJ. And I'm more and more falling into a camp of JJ and Stewie kind of fit a similar role. And how is this team going to find a way to, obviously in their own ways, their skill set and their styles of play are very different, but they fit some similar roles. So my question for them is kind of like, where do we see them? I don't care about them now. And you'll note when I do my power rankings, they're a lot lower than I think anybody else has them. Because I think power rankings to me is not, I think often our vision of the team impacts the power ranking more so than like, where are they today? And so that's my big question for New York. Like, who's going to be that paint presence? Who's going to be that person who just wants to be the dog, the bully, the mean person on the team? And then Dallas is a team that I've loved what LT's been doing since she's gotten there. I love you can see the culture shifting. And you can also see in past games, like Aryeh over, I'm excluding this last game because I don't have the stats in front of me, but Aryeh over her like last 4 or 5 games is like north of 6 assists in each of those games, except one. I think one game she had 2 assists, then she had 5 once, and then it's been like 7, 8, something like that for the rest of it. And so for me, like, that's a huge thing. If you can make Aryeh, like, if there's a last second shot, Aryeh's touching the ball. That doesn't mean Aryeh should be putting up 20 shots a game. Satu is playing incredibly. They have a variety of other players on this team. Do they lack some offense in some ways? Fine. Yeah, they lost Marina. I get it. But having Natasha Howard, I mean, their big three are putting up double-doubles basically every game. So for me, the question for Dallas is kind of like, where's the consistency? If you can be consistent, then I consider you a championship contender. You have the skill sets. You have the players needed. And you have the variety, having Tierra McCowan and now I'm blanking on her name, filling in for Tierra McCowan.
Kalani Brown.
Thank you, Kalani Brown. Having like that physical dominance, like they're honestly a Swiss Army knife of a team, and they can really play whoever they want. They don't necessarily have as much depth as we would have seen if said they kept Marina. But you know what? This is where we are now.
No, and I think the interesting thing there is when I'm thinking about my question marks in the league right now, my first one was just Washington question mark because I don't know how that's going to go. You brought up Dallas, who was a big one for me. Like I'm curious if this is where Dallas peaks, what will their peak be, and how do they get there? Like you said, some of the offense. I've been a big supporter of the Satu Sabally, best player on the Winds all season long. And I'm just curious, like, how do they generate more offense like that? How do they start knocking? Because they are like their pace is they're moving out there on the court, but the shots are not falling. And so I'm curious about Dallas. And then the other one you brought up is New York, which is another one where I'm a lot more chillaxed on where New York is personally. And so my question was New York and Las Vegas, will they peak at the right time? And so I think we're in a similar boat as we take a look at the league. And I guess, do you have any points off of that, or do you want to hop right into power rankings?
No, I love that. I mean, I think like we'd be remiss if we don't talk about how ridiculously impressive Chicago's been. Like, I mean, James Wade is a freaking beast. And I don't want to give all credit to him. Like, obviously the players are delivering, but like, I just keep thinking back to that press conference when they did that trade and they got Marina, and everyone's like, what? You gave up like all draft stock for the next like 20 years. What are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm not losing. I don't know about you, but I'm not losing. And I was just like, this guy knew something. They like the personality of Chicago is a dog. Like, they're underdogs. They're biting for that bone. They are a junkyard dog or what. I don't even know. Just like they are not going to let roster, rankings or power rankings. Nothing is going to define them other than their play. And they are going to claw and crawl and bite and do whatever it takes to get the win. And honestly, like, New York needs to just like get a sliver of that. If they want to continue. And then, yeah, I mean, to your point, I think Dallas is a really interesting one. I think like right now they're shooting second to last. I looked last night. They're shooting second to last 3-point percentage in the league. But that's just because of high volume. So I think what we've seen is these weird flows with Dallas where Satu's having crazy efficient great games, and then Aryeh tries to almost like remind the world, hey, this is my team. And obviously I'm like reading into things way too much, but like, hey, this is my
It
team.
looks like that.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And then Aryeh puts up like a large swath of shots, half of them bad shots. And so it kind of seems like this ebb and flow of like statistically and like shot wise, they're looking much better. And then all of a sudden, Aryeh just does Aryeh things and it just dampens it. So I'm not as concerned with that because I think it all boils down to, can LT get Aryeh to buy into the
Hmm.
system? I think everybody else on the team is bought into the system, and I see signs that Aryeh is. But that's the big question. And yeah, I think like, oh, well, I've got a question for you. Who's your title favorite?
Oh, my title favorite. I mean, I've been steady about this since day one, and that's the Aces. I just think that they are a step ahead of everyone right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if I had to put, here's the thing. I think like people often, I'll make predictions. I'll say this is my title favorite or whatever. I view it in a different light because for me, it's a safe bet to bet Vegas, right? But also, I don't think it is, and only in the sense of, look what they needed last year to win a championship. They needed everyone to stay healthy, even Dearica Hamby, who pregnant, injuries, club issues, whatever. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but like without her, they don't win that championship.
Hmm.
And I think that showed how delicate the ecosystem of Vegas was. Now, when they were winning, they were flying high, destroying teams, winning by 30, everyone, greatest team ever, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, they have more depth now. But for me, it completely comes down to just like, can all of their key players stay healthy? Can Jackie Young stay healthy? Can Asia Wilson stay healthy? Can a variety, like Kelsey Plum, is she gonna? I know her shot's been struggling early in the season. It's gotten a little better. Can she find her shot after the shoulder surgery? So I think Vegas has a lot of question marks. And then the other, so like in on one side, I'm like, okay, here are the question marks for Vegas. New York, just because I'm a hater, I personally don't want New York Vegas finals. And I don't think it's gonna happen either. I think it's gonna take a like maybe New York peaks at the right time, but I think it's gonna be like a next season thing for New York. Um, just because so much change, so much pressure, and a lot of these players trying to fit in personality wise into new roles. Play wise, they have a great mesh, but but emotionally, mentally, and like in a leadership voice way, a lot of these players are going to have to shift roles that they've had throughout the majority of their career. Um, so honestly, like DC, I don't trust their coach. I think they have the whatever. I'm looking at Connecticut, and if like I was betting again, title favorite Vegas, fine. If I'm betting, I'm putting it on Connecticut because I think they're one of the top three teams, and they probably you have more of a cash out if you get that right. So I'm always kind of thinking, but that's just I'm not even a better, but that's just how I think. Is just like this is what's expected. And if I say I'm picking this team and they win it, you look so much better and smarter. But like everyone's picking Vegas, so like I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you just go through the numbers for Las Vegas, it seems obvious there too, as well as their 9-1 record. But from the way that I've like sort of watched them so far this season, it's like they're running a lot of Chelsea Gray. They're going a lot through Asia Wilson. I feel like Jackie Young obviously is having this breakout season. I think Kelsey Plum could play or step into a much larger role if needed to in this injury scenario. I think a player like CP3, very similar, and probably come the playoffs will step up a
Yeah,
lot more too. And so I think that's where I would combat that injury thought.
definitely.
But it's very fair that whatever team gets through is going to have to be lucky at the end of the day. And then New York, I did want to touch a little bit because you mentioned Brianna Stewart.
Wait. If you
Okay,
I have to
okay.
put your feet to the fire, because I have my own podcast. I'm used to asking questions. Vegas, who's if you were to pick an MVP on Vegas so far this season, who is it?
Oh my gosh, that's tough. I I guess it's Jackie.
I agree. Yeah. Well, I
Okay.
think a lot of people because like you points wise, I mean, literally during the game, Rachel and I were like texting. Rachel's like, "You can't be serious about Jackie." I was like, "Let's run over the numbers, Rachel." Or yesterday's game where Jackie blew up for like 29 or something, um, and shot an insanely efficient. That's the other thing. Jackie Young is shooting like 45% from three.
I saw Rachel tweeted that out today.
Yeah, it's insane. She's shooting a better percentage from the field than Asia, which historically, and Asia has a 0% from three. I didn't check the stat to see if she shot any threes this year, but she clearly hasn't made any. Um,
She
her
has
average,
shot some.
yeah, okay. So they have, uh, they're essentially very similar. Jackie now has the edge points per game. Obviously, rebounds per game is going to go Asia. Assists is going to be
I'd be looking at
split.
Chelsea Gray. Uh, I'd be looking at Chelsea Gray as kind of the alternative to Jackie. I was going back and forth between those two for MVP.
Interesting. I honestly I haven't even checked out Chelsea Gray's stats enough to look at it because I kept saying like I just keep watching the games and Jackie's the one that stands out. Or I look back later at the box scores and I'm just like, oh snap. And then you look at the efficiency and you're like, oh snap. So I honestly like everyone just kept rebuttaling with Asia. So I was like, oh, I didn't even look at Chelsea. So all right, way to flip it on its head. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean that's a tough one, and like I said, I guess I've talked about this with Lowe on the podcast, and same with Nick Andre. Just like this team is so loaded. I guess the injury standpoint, if New York maybe peaks at the right time, I'm with you there. But yeah, on Las Vegas, Jackie's been incredible. They've been incredible. I think they're the favorite. That's where we're at right now.
They're defending champs and they have one loss on the season a quarter of the way through. Like, I mean, yeah, no, they're there. Wait, what? I cut you off. You were gonna say something about New York.
Yeah, New York with Breonna Stewart and Jonquil Jones fit in a similar role. Are are you at all? Because I was a little concerned early on, and obviously coming off of an injury for Jonquil Jones, just playing about 20 minutes a night. Um, but
I scoff at that whole injury thing. Like, yeah, she's cranking it back up. I think often, uh, as fans, as media members, we kind of have to sift through the BS a little bit and like, no, and like this isn't shade or anything like that, but like coaches like and GMs, they like to put out narratives
hmm,
because like coaches are kind of gaslighters if we're being real in the sense that like they create a narrative that is real or not, or like they take a sliver of truth to make it into this huge thing to motivate the team. They have to motivate the team. And I think they also, part of that motivating the team is having the team's back and setting expectations. So I kind of scoff at, like, I know New York local people will be like, what are you talking about? I think that like they're purposely taking it slow because they're focused on the playoffs. But sorry, continue.
no, I think that's very fair. I think that we've started to see a little bit better Jonquil Jones, and I'm going to point to her 2021 MVP season where there is no, excuse me, Alyssa Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Bree Jones is there, but I think this is once she gets into full bore, whether injured or not, would be. I think this is a great place for her to kind of step up, especially as the big presence down low. We saw that a little bit in the Atlanta game most recently, where she picked up two early fouls, but had been just dominating in the paint. The much shorter Cheyenne Parker on her. So I think that's interesting to point out that they kind of fit a similar role, Bruce Stewart and Jonquil Jones. I just hadn't really thought about it. And I think if you're going to try to solve that, maybe having Jonquil kind of play those second unit roles and kind of stagger them a little bit minutes wise. But no, it's really interesting. And I think the bid depth is fascinating to look at for New York with Sabali and Dolson off the bench and
Yeah.
Hanshu not playing.
Well, yeah, and Han. I mean, so my thing is this: like, Atlanta punched them in the face because Atlanta did the same exact thing the next game too. Going up against Connecticut, where, and shout out to Atlanta, they found a rhythm. They were a team that I really, early on in the season, I was like, not getting it, not feeling it. But now it seems like they're kind of on the path. It took a little bit, but now, it's kind of like if you've ever seen Cool Runnings, the bobsled movie, when they like need to get the push off going. And it felt like they were struggling on the push off. Now they're in the bobsled, they're going down the hill, and we're rolling. Um, New York's a really, really interesting team because while JJ can be a dominant paint presence, I've never personally thought of her as that physically dominant,
Hmm,
Sylvia Fowles-esque player. And I think she's somebody who, like, she just needs, like, I keep going back, they need the dog in them. They need that, like, that oomph, that drive, that extra just little push. I agree. I think staggering them is a benefit to the team, but I also think at the end of the day, you're going to need them to be able to play together in the playoffs, in the finals. So,
good
like,
point.
as well, get the rust off the wheels and the cobwebs and all that jazz. It's a really interesting, and I think a lot of people would push back, like, what are you talking about? Stewie's so much more mobile and blah blah blah. But, like, look at what JJ does. She wants to be beyond the arc. She wants to be hitting those shots. She wants to be pulling the fadeaway baseline shots. Like, JJ has a lot of finesse to her game. And I think at times, Kurt Miller and the Connecticut Sun were able to say, okay, we have other players that can replace that physicality. Because even in that MVP season, JJ wasn't like dominating in the
Hmm,
sense of it was a close game and they had to continue to pound it down low to JJ or something
true.
like that. You know, it was a 20-point lead, a 10-point lead. Like, they were dominating and JJ was playing amazing, but like, she was in a good position for her style of play. That's
And
they have a ridiculously good roster. So
yeah, New York. Maybe that's their hope at Peach. They find that place to be. Like you said, the depth on that roster is also insane. I I don't know. I That's a really tough place to be for New York. I agree with you with John Quill being a lot more finesse. Where I think what Connecticut had was too much or too many players that needed to go into the post. This is a
mhm.
whole side conversation
Oh yeah,
with where Connecticut was, but I think kind of where that helps is now JJ can do a little bit of both. Bruce Stewart can do a little bit of both.
hmm,
If they can try to even rival that side to side on the court, and they can
yes,
play together like that,
yes.
is maybe where this team peaks out.
That's where I think it needs to go. It needs to be kind of like a tango between them where
Mm,
they're taking turns. They're kind of, it has to be a dance with them and it's going to take time. And that's why, like, me personally, um, because I know we're running low on time, but like, me personally, I have New York a little bit lower than some other people in the power rankings because I think where they are now is not where they're going to be in 2-3 weeks from now. And I'm not judging them on where they're going to be. I'm judging them on the fact that they should have lost 2 games to Chicago and they just lost to Atlanta. And, like, I'm sorry, they're not the number 2 team.
okay. All right. All
They're
right.
the
We'll
number
start.
3.
We'll go right into the power rankings then because that's where we're at. I'm curious for you though. First, I see probably three, maybe four tiers in the power rankings. Where do you see kind of all the teams shaping up into?
I think currently it's Vegas is in a tier of its own.
Okay,
Like,
that's fair.
um, there's teams that I think can beat them, but like currently where we're at, like power ranking wise, there's not a debate. And I think power ranking is tiers too. I think it's who's the best team in the league, and okay, is there another team competing with them? So for me, it's Vegas. No one's competing with them to be the best right now. Below that are the teams that are competing as like we like the isn't it like a boxing or like a the number one contender or something like that term. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're fighting to be like widely known as the team that can beat the best team. And to me, that's Connecticut, Chicago, and the Liberty. And that's literally right now. Everyone's gonna look at me and go, look at Chicago's record. I don't care. They're gonna say, look at this. I don't care. Chicago's been injured. So you don't get to use injuries as an excuse for other teams. You don't get to say, Sabrina was out, so that's why New York lost. They should be. No, I'm sorry. Every team has injuries except Vegas. Even Vegas does, but like that's on their bench. Who cares? And Chicago has just found ways to win. Do I think in 2 weeks from now Chicago will be a top 5 team? Maybe 5. But then I would have, and I honestly I think you can make an argument between Dallas and New York, but I think you put New York above them just because of sheer talent. And so those are like the kind of the next 3 to me. It's Connecticut, Chicago, New York.
Really?
And
Okay.
then at 5, that's where I have Dallas. Because again, I view them as a contender. What I've seen from them is the growth that I want to see from this team, which is closing out games that they were down for a majority of the second half. They're down 5 to 10 points, and they find a way in the fourth to pull out and win. That's like a huge growth moment for me. And then at 6, that's where I have Atlanta, LA, Indiana, those teams that are kind of finding their way. I'm not concerned about them like being real contenders, but they're on the right path. They're making positive steps forward. They might get blown out one night and then the next night make up for a really competitive game. And then you got, Phoenix, Seattle, Minnesota just sitting on the bottom.
Uh-huh.
Here. That said, the team that I'm the lowest on is Phoenix by far. They have just looked abysmal. And now you have BG hurt. I don't know what's going on, where this team is going to go. It's a huge issue. Mo Jeff just hasn't been able to supply the offense. Honestly, I, again, look at a lot of coaching. Minnesota and Seattle, like, at least they're not giving up. You know what I mean? Like, Seattle is becoming a fun team because they just going to give a big push. And then Minnesota, my hometown team that I love to nitpick with a fine-tooth comb. Honestly, like, Minnesota, I'm happy because Dorka's been amazing. And Fee has, in my opinion, taken that next step that you need. And again, you're not winning a championship this year. So you need your young players to grow, your superstar cornerstone to grow, take steps forward, and then get a good draft pick next year. And then we can talk.
I was going to ask you about Minnesota all right, so the way I see these power rankings, I think it's very fair to have Las Vegas up at top tier. And kind of the way I was looking at it was 3 tiers where you've got 3 teams at the top, you've got 3 teams relatively at the bottom. And that cluster in the middle, I think, is very interesting. One of the most interesting parts of this WNBA season so far for me. And then it just depends on where you rank these teams. I think it's interesting that you see it as kind of a tiered ranking, but I think it's fair to see 4 tiers as well with Las Vegas up top. That's where I've got them as well. I've got New York coming in second just because I still think that amount of talent that we just talked about. We touched on New York a lot, but yeah. I think that they fit right there.
Totally fair.
And did you have Connecticut right below?
So I had Connecticut
above.
2. Yeah, I had Connecticut 2, and then Chicago 3, and I know you're not going to agree with that.
Yeah, okay. So Chicago, I'm just not so certain on how I feel about the Sky. I know that they are certainly in that tier. They were way higher in the start of my season power rankings, and
after a few games or coming in before the season started?
Before the season, I had them in 7th in that tier. Okay. And they jumped up in my second week power rankings, where they just got off to a great start. But I didn't think they've beaten great competition.
Yeah,
they have lost to teams like the Mystics and a few others recently. I'm blanking on who else. Yeah. But I do have them in that second tier. So I guess I'll run through my list real fast. But that's Atlanta in 4th. I just have been really impressed. Obviously, 2 big wins recently. And so because of that, it's probably a little bit too much recency bias, but I do put them in 4th.
That's what power ranking is, all recency bias. That's what it is.
I had them as my 5th place team as a prediction before the year came out.
Okay.
And right now they're sitting in 8th, but there's a whole bunch of teams right in that layer where I think they could very well jump up to being a fifth seed. Obviously, I had Washington as a third seed, and that is below because I have LA. And I will have to let you know I was dead wrong about the LA Sparks heading into this year. It was the one team where I couldn't get a feel for where they were. Everywhere else, I'm pretty close in
Yeah.
terms of where they're at right now in the standings at least. But LA, I'll put them fifth right now. I feel
I
very
I love that you have Atlanta and LA as 4 or 5. Mostly no, because I think like too often in the W world, because it's such a tight knit community, we kind of end up playing follow the leader. And I love power rankings that are like almost blind power rankings in the sense like that's different than other power rankings I've seen. And it's amazing to see that variety of perspective. I love it.
well, I mean, with both of those teams, I think we haven't seen where they can go. I'm basing that in a little bit as well because I'm again so wrong on LA. I can't stress that enough. I think they can be very good. As for some reason beating good teams recently and then just losing to bad teams.
Yeah.
But that's my 4-5. I do still have Washington in sixth because I don't want to overreact here, but it's not looking good
Yeah.
over in DC. We've touched on them a little bit. I don't know. There are other teams that I want to touch on more today. Indiana, I have in seventh, and I almost put them ahead of Washington, but had them in ninth heading into the season. It didn't look good right off the bat. But a
But they want to be
third, what's that?
they want to be 9. That team's not no, like that team's not winning a
It's a
championship.
good
They're the
point.
team because they've been so bad for the past 10 years. They're the team who like Minnesota has to lose 8 more games than them to like dethrone them and getting the best projection for or like percentage for the draft lottery. So like they're pretty set.
And they find themselves in ninth. So, and you're right. They did kind of give themselves a great lead for that draft spot heading into the year.
That's a
But
great positive way of framing it. I love it.
but at 4 and 6 right now, they could very well be positioning themselves to fight for a playoff spot.
Oh yeah.
Is that a good thing? Would you like to see them do that, or do you think no, they need to be going for this
So
draft pick?
I mean, here's the thing. I think it's tough because how are you viewing it, right? Like it's a balancing act. If you do too bad for too long, you lose your fan base. That's just a reality of sports. And then arguably you disappear. Um, but like on the other hand, if you truly want success, sometimes the problem with Indiana, okay, I'll put it this way. The problem with Indiana is I would be completely fine saying you do not want to win. You want to stay out of the playoffs this year and next year, or at least definitely this year. And then you can do some trades to get into the draft for next year, 2 years from now. The problem is, and like full shade to Tamika Catchings as a GM, she was really, really bad. And because she was
Yeah,
really, really bad, it prolonged the reset. So now we are teetering onto that point of losing. I don't want to say like, oh, I know we're losing the fan base in Indiana. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like when you enter 10 years of bad, you start to like, that's at a point where it's like, okay, we no longer can sit here and go, it's better for us to sit one more year out of the playoffs, right? Like you're almost like
interesting.
got the number 1 pick finally. The next step has to be the playoffs almost. So I see both sides of it. And I think it truly comes down to honestly, like that's a team where I look at them and I go, do what you want. You know what I mean? Like Atlanta, you should probably want to, stay in this next year's draft.
Mm,
Minnesota, Seattle, definitely. But like Indiana, it's like, okay, honestly, if we're being real, you probably already have the tools on this roster. It's more about those
interesting.
tools growing. Nalissa Smith is a beast. Her and Aaliyah Boston
Love Melissa
together
Smith.
is an insane combo that is going to wreak havoc across the W if they can keep them together. Where the weakness is their shooting. I'm not as high on Kelsey Mitchell as a lot of other people.
Very high over here.
And totally fair. And like I think that they're going to need Grace Berger. They're going to need I don't know why they got rid of Destiny, but they're going to need like
Hmm.
one of those younger Lexi Hall, like one of those younger backcourt players.
To pop.
Yeah. Like that's what it comes down to. It's not like, oh, they need to get in the draft. They need Paige. They need Caitlin Clark. No, like that's honestly not what it is. It's that they already have drafted players who are going to take some time to grow. You need one of them to pop. You need one of them to step in. So I think Indiana's a really, really fun team. But like, let's also keep some realistic expectations of what's going on. Aaliyah Boston's having an insane season, but like, I don't know. I want to temper expectations. Like, she's not in the MVP race. Okay. Like, her working
Right there
Elizabeth
with you.
Williams meant absolutely nothing. Okay. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I saw people tweeting about it. Like, she did great. She's been doing great. She's going to continue to do great and get better and better and better. But like, let's slow down a little bit. Okay.
Slow
She's not
down.
Candace Parker. She's not Asia Wilson. She's not Brianna Stewart. Like, she's playing amazing. She's going to be an all-star. She's not an MVP. Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay. I was to say, I
Yes.
was
Yeah.
kind of waiting on that last word to come out there. I so from my perspective, I think they could really use that. Obviously it's top of the draft, but a Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers at the guard spot to go along with Melissa Smith and Aaliyah Boston. I think it's interesting that you think they might already have the pieces, and the way that they're just continuing to compete. I love what Christy Sides is doing. The
Mhm.
intensity over on the sideline is just something to watch every
Oh, yeah.
single Indiana game. So I don't know. I think I would prefer them not to go for that draft pick rather than the playoffs. But they're right now they're in every single game that they're playing.
Ideally, but I do think a good aspect that we haven't even touched on is their whole roster is just super, super young. And the vets that they have never had success in the league. And like,
Mm,
I know everyone likes to say, like, oh, Leah Boston won some titles. Like, oh, these players won titles in college. Caitlin Clark has had success. She brought Iowa to the final. Like, sorry, doesn't matter. It's the WNBA, it's the pros, it's a different beast, it's a different league, it's a different language. So on what I'm weighing is making the playoffs and having playoff experience, because we've already seen in this quarter of the season they can't close games out. They've closed one game out. And so
yeah,
I think like that's part of it. It's like going to the playoffs is almost part of that growth of learning how to close games out. And so I view it
interesting.
as like the young roster they have now, Leah Boston, Nalissa Smith, Queen Egbo, those players learning how to win, learning how to close games out and make it to the playoffs versus adding one more talent and then hoping to make that step in that learning process the next year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not a GM.
A
Yeah.
couple of great, honestly, not a bad spot to be in,
Yeah.
more than anything
Yeah.
for Indiana.
Yes.
So that's why I have them seventh, as I did leapfrog them over, and I know you're not going to like this, over Dallas in eighth and Chicago in ninth.
It's
And,
fair.
and I just, man, Dallas and Chicago, sell me on them. I guess like for me in Dallas, we'll start there, where their offense, I think they're like middle of the pack in offensive rating. I know they're shooting. I believe they're 10th in effective field goal percentage and
Yeah.
true shooting percentage, but they're running. They're first in pace. So I have questions about the offense. I don't think they are necessarily a contender, at least not from what they've shown so far. I have major questions about Aryeh to this point. And so that's why, especially after the last few games, injuries have hurt them. I put them in eight.
Yeah.
How would you respond to
You're crazy. You're horrible. Shut. No,
that?
no. No, I think it's totally fair. I think we've seen a lot of great highs from them and a lot of bad
Mm.
lows. And that's same with Chicago, right? We've seen them contend against top tier teams and then just be blown out of the water.
I
That's
think
to
they've
be
slowed
expected.
down.
They have slowed down. Definitely. I think for me, again, if we're talking power ranking wise, that's one thing. If we're talking about long-term season success, that's different. I think
Fair.
long-term season success, they're a team that I don't really I care that they're record wise in the middle of the pack to the top half of the league, mostly because that's where they're going to need to be if they want to peak at the right time. We've talked about peaking at the right time a lot this episode. And I think that's such an underrated element of a season is you don't want to be and I think maybe saying it out loud, Chicago is peaking early. We'll see if they can sustain it. I don't know, but Chicago's a fun team that happens to be able to exploit the weaknesses of a Connecticut, a New York, and a Mystics. Well, less so Mystics, but seriously, Connecticut and New York who lack guard defense. And so having a Marina, having a Ka, having that ability to get just a large swath of points from those key players in the guard position where that's a weakness for New York and Connecticut defensively, I think to me makes me feel better about their ability. And also like, look, I look at it when I do power rankings, I look at, okay, when was the last power ranking? And from that point, from the next day after that until today, what happened? I don't get into stats because I think the stats are weighed by who they play. I look at like, I say that, but obviously look at some stats, right? But like, I look at kind of like, okay, the record, who those teams were. Is a player having just like a crazy run right now? Is the team playing an elite defense or just finding some flow? And then I kind of look like, okay, for instance, with New York and Chicago, they were very close in my mind based on the last time we did a power ranking to this time. Just in terms of we saw them play twice. We saw, Chicago have some highs and then lose to Vegas. Not forgetting that. But I look at it and I go, okay, these two teams in my mind are on the same tier. When they played each other, it doesn't matter if it was the beginning of that time frame or the end. I'm going to very directly look at those games to kind of decide who I give the edge to, because to me, power ranking is like, okay, if you went up against a random team, who would you win? Like Vegas, beat them all. Connecticut, I would beat most of them except Vegas. So it's like, that's kind of where I go is like, I think LA would today lose to Dallas. I think that's how I kind of view it, which ends up being like, well, Connecticut, I said would lose to Atlanta, who I said would lose. And it like gets very convoluted and confusing. And it's just like a worm eat worm. Don't do it. No, but I honestly, I think there's so much fluidity. The only gripe I would honestly have with your power ranking, is, yeah, I mean, honestly, I would just have New York's too high. But like everyone's doing that. So like, why am I? Yeah, I'm the crazy one, right? Like you're not the crazy one. I'm the crazy one.
Okay, so I guess even stepping away from New York though, we didn't touch enough on Atlanta and LA in my opinion. And so like when I compare I think you had Chicago in third or
Yeah.
yes, okay. And I have Chicago in ninth. I put Atlanta up there in fourth. And Chicago in ninth. I think I looked at it and Atlanta, who did started at 2-5 before winning their last two wins over New York and Connecticut. Two very impressive wins as of recently.
Yeah.
So I just from that perspective, I think it is like a very much looking at how they've done recently. If you asked me a week ago for Atlanta, I probably would have had them ninth. In all honesty.
Let me give an asterisk next to where I placed Atlanta, only because we at Winsidr did our power rankings at we turned them in we ran it on Monday. So we turned in Sunday night, Monday morning. So like I basically took that power ranking and adjusted it slightly. And since that time, Atlanta has chopped down some giants. So totally fair. They should be higher. That's on me. No, they 100% should. I think Atlanta's an interesting one because Cheyenne Parker's really come out crazy these past couple games. Alicia Gray and Ryan Howard are still trying to find their groove.
Yeah.
And Aaron McDonald being out, like I think it's the right direction for this team. Do I have the faith in them to continue it for a couple more games? No, not yet. But as of now, you're right. They are an elite team. They're playing great. The LA Sparks are an interesting one because they just
Yes.
have the worst health luck of all time. Um, Colds, flus, like every
Well,
non-COVID illness, then like random Leja gets hurt, then this player gets hurt, Azrae is hurt. Like, but the thing honestly with LA is like they were in a crappy position for the past few years with Derek Fisher, and now they have a sorry, Derek Fisher, they have a competent coach. And they have someone who's an established person who knows how to build a team. Kurt Miller, a phrase at Winsidr that we love, Kurt Miller is an elite floor raiser. He's
Mm.
going to raise the floor of every team he's on. He's doing a great job of that currently for LA. LA is a really interesting one. I mean, they're a great example of they have a lot of players on a roster that like wouldn't be starters, wouldn't be getting like a legit shot. And the players are proving it. They're taking advantage of it. Unlike Seattle. But so I think it's like it's a really fun team. I think, NECA continues to play an elite level of basketball. If they had a better
Mm.
record, maybe she's in the MVP conversation. But I just don't have confidence in them. They like the amount of giant leads that they've blown is worrisome. Similar with Washington.
Yeah, yeah, against Seattle.
See, how did you not win that? How do you not? You come back 28 points, 27 points, whatever it was. They're done 28, 29, and you couldn't finish it. And honestly, like, I know it's a W on Washington's record, but not in my book. Like, that was a loss. I don't care. I don't care. Sorry. Like,
Elena Del Don wasn't playing, to be fair.
oh, that's fine. Doesn't like still lost in my book.
Yeah, I don't know. At some point soon, I need to talk about Washington on a podcast. That I covered them last year for Monumental Sports and Entertainment, and I couldn't say it at the time, but just one of the teams that their lack of consistency boggled my mind, and I can see it now. I can say it now.
It's the
Um,
same thing for like 4 years since they won all right, sorry, for like 6 years minus the 1 year they won the championship. It's been the same thing.
what was the difference for
The
2019?
championship year,
Yeah.
everyone was shooting an insane clip. And the thing is like when everyone is shooting that well percentage wise, there's no stress, there's no worry, there's no, hey, you scored a bunch, I want to be able to get a shot in, because it's just fluid. Everyone's loving it. Everyone's happy. It's the honeymoon
Mm.
period at a job when you first start working there. Um, Everything's working great. And then you literally just see it like it gets stagnant. It just gets bad. They don't move the ball. At like 4 or 5 games in, Ariel Atkins was shooting 11% from three, Natasha Cloud 13%. Like they've picked it up a little bit, but like to me, it always boiled down to Cloud and Atkins have a past, a history, if you will, of going MIA when Elena Deladon needs somebody to support her, offensive production wise. And Shakira definitely lightens the load, and I think has kind of disguised it a little bit because now you have Deli and Shakira balling, but you still need that scoring from the three. You still need that scoring from the ones and the twos. And just historically, like Natasha Cloud, I'm sorry, you're like, stop with this I'm a shooter thing. You're not a shooter. You are an elite point guard who can shoot when needed to, but when
Mm.
you make that too much of your game, you get distracted from what makes you a great point guard, which is being aggressive, attacking the paint, facilitating, kicking out to the hot hand, and when your team needs it, hitting a big shot and playing elite defense.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that I mean, Yeah, Washington. I'm gonna push them off her.
You should have Matt Cohen on. He would love. He will give you a 50 hours rant on in advanced statistics, the stats, that all the issues that
I've
Washington.
got to go in depth on this team because their inconsistency bothered me last year, and this year it seems to be so much
Yeah.
worse. Because,
Yes.
like you said, the shots just aren't falling. I do love Natasha Cloud, big fan over here,
Oh yeah.
but it's a fair criticism at this moment. Um, all right, well, as we get down to the last three, we have the same three: Phoenix, Seattle, Minnesota. Is it in that order for you?
No. It's Minnesota, Seattle, Phoenix. And Phoenix is Phoenix injury wise. Phoenix Diana Taurasi just shooting horribly. Phoenix honestly, you had hoped with BG coming back, and it sucks that she's not healthy right now, but like you would hope that they could just find a way. BG has been playing amazing, and nobody else on the team is showing up. Bree Turner, who's one of my favorite, she's the only player in the league that I feel like has a roster spot just based on defense. And
Yeah,
she's an elite defender, but she has not been an elite defender this season. And while BG has been really, really good defensively, she's also been a little bit slow on some stuff. I just think that this team is there was like it was historically the Mercury doesn't matter what they do in the beginning of the season. All that matters is can they make the playoffs and make a push. If they do, they have Taurasi's going to show up for a couple games. BG's going to beast. Not having Skylar is huge.
it
Honestly,
is.
like if I was Phoenix, I know you can't do this because of history and everything, but like you drop DT and you keep Skylar. I'm sorry if you want
You
to
could
win.
never do that.
They could never do it. Also, they hired a coach who literally would just let DT be in charge as opposed to hiring the best coach for the job. So, like, there's so many issues from top down for Phoenix. Happy BG's back. Happy she's playing at a high clip, but like, sorry, it needs to be better. Seattle's a fun one that maybe my hometown bias made me put Minnesota above them. I always like put that out there because I hate when people are like, well, you're biased. I'm very open about the fact that I'm biased. Like, but also that biasness can often cause me to be extra harsh on them. So I think it's like a double-edged sword.
It's fair.
Seattle, I like because they're second halves. Like they're showing fight. It's easy when it's
Yeah,
on 20 or 30 or 14 or 15 to just give up and phone it in the second half, and they don't do that. And I love that. And also like Jewel Lloyd's one of my favorite players in the league. And then Minnesota, like we talked about it, Fee has taken that step to like Fee has always been a great player, a star. The question has always been, can she become a superstar? Can she create more off the dribble? She's doing that. She looks like the game has slowed down for her, where up until this point, it felt like almost, like all right, this is going to be a crazy comparison, but like, I don't know if any listeners or you yourself, like when you play in a game, like in an organized sports league, or like you're running like a race or whatever it is, and you're at the starting line or like the game's about to start and you have those butterflies, right? And you're like and the game starts or the race starts, and the first 5 minutes or however long of it, your breathing is too accelerated because you're too energized, you're too like this is a big moment, there's a lot going on.
yeah.
I almost felt like I saw that style of breathing from Fee, but I don't see that anymore. And it's like a crazy weird thing to pick up on or whatever, but like it just seemed like now she finally feels comfortable. And now it looks like the game has slowed down for her even more. And she's taking that next step, and she's, exuding force when she needs to, but reserving it when she doesn't need to. And that's been like a huge leap for her that I'm really excited about. And that's
No.
the only good thing I can say about Minnesota.
Yeah, okay. I love Nafisa Collier, big fan of that. And I think the comparison, just starting a race or starting a game, it makes sense. I know what you're saying. And I think most people who play organized sports will know, or maybe you just have to have like a little bit of anxiety. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but uh, with Minnesota, I do have them in last, and a bit like I said, Nafisa Collier has stepped up. Some of those performances have been really, really solid. I think what I can't do is I don't know that I can put them ahead. Maybe Seattle, but I don't think I can put them much higher than that until they have a point guard, and that it kills me watching them down the stretch of every game. And I don't know, like, can this team be any better moving forward without that? Is there a point guard on the horizon? Or are you just looking at draft picks?
No, if I'm Minnesota, honestly, like cut Lindsay Allen. Like, and I don't mean that in like, oh, you should cut her because she's so bad. No, cut her because you don't need a point guard. What and call me crazy, flipping it on its head. You don't need a point guard because they're not like they're not competing. If you had Skylar Diggins Smith, they're still not going to be a championship contender, right? Like you add
Interesting.
Chelsea Gray, I don't think that all of a sudden they become a championship contender. So like what I would say is they're in a position where they don't have a true point guard that they're starting with at least.
Find
Like when
more
coming off,
opportunities.
yeah, find more opportunities,
Mm,
play more ball in your best player's hands. Like just have feet. Like one game Fee was taking the ball up the court every, like, why not? Right. And then if you cut a Lindsay Allen, you get an opportunity to take a flyer out on a rookie like a Taylor Soule, who now is signed to Chicago for hardship, but like would have loved to see Minnesota sign a player like that. You have
mm.
a variety of players that can drive and that are fairly good shooters, like Caleb McBride, Ariel Powers, Bridget Carlton. Like you have players who are not elite shooters, but are good shooters and good drivers. So for me, it's anybody can take the ball up the court, right? Anybody takes up the court, pass the ball around, just move. Like it should be what did Ted Lasso call that style of soccer they're playing where
Oh
it's like
goodness.
um whatever it was,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
free ball or whatever, like play that style of basketball. Just bring the ball up the court, feed it around, draw some motions, feed like there's a lot of opportunity to get creative. And I think it can be exciting too, because if I'm Reeve, I'm looking at this team and I'm going, all I care about is Fee. It's building around Fee. Is Dorka a good fit to build around Fee? Is Tiffany Hayes? Is Kayla McBride going to stay? Is she a good, like, all I care about is figuring out the two things. There's only two things that Cheryl Reeve needs to focus on this season. One, what players on this roster do any of them complement Fee? And using the current players on the roster to figure out if there's someone coming up in the draft who could complement Fee. That's it.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very fair place to be. It's really interesting. I have been a proponent of playing a lot more through Jessica Shepard,
That too.
high
Oh,
post.
yes. She's the best
Just
passer on the team.
would make the offense so much prettier. Um,
Yeah.
but
That
yeah,
said, wait. That said, I want Fee's primary ball handler because Shep doesn't have that. But I want the ball majorly should be going through Shep and let
okay.
her. I completely agree. That's an excellent point.
But like it would help with the offense. For me though, Minnesota, I think they are the worst team in the league. Seattle is definitely competing with them for that. And for some reason Phoenix has decided to jump in there.
Why not?
Um but that's a great place to be. I guess my last question for you. I know you love this one, but who is the GOAT?
You know it's Simone Augustus. I mean, we got
Yeah.
4 rings, we got Finals MVP, we got a rookie scoring record that not Asia Wilson could break, not anybody else could break. We have a player who was a key component on arguably the greatest or second greatest dynasty in league history. You have a player who has continuously reshaped her career, her style of play to fit what the team needs. To me, I think we look around the league and you see a lot of players who just fit into one box. Diana Taurasi,
Mm.
horrible defender, but great shooter. Oh, so everyone thinks, oh, she's a great shooter. She's the best shooter, so she has to be the GOAT. Sue Bird, an amazing facilitator. She's the best facilitator. She has to be the GOAT. Or Tamika Catchings, best defender. It has to be like I don't think all those players could shift their game to do what was necessary to win the game. Now, obviously, they do in small ways, right? Tamika found ways to score. Diana Taurasi has made some amazing blocks. Sue Bird has made some big threes in her game. But I think when you look individually at each season of Simone Augustus, she tweaked her game to fit what the team needed, and that was a key element to winning those rings. And going to 5 finals and losing one to Tamika. But yeah, I mean, I think you talk about that, and then look, if we're talking about the what ifs, she didn't have such bad knee injuries, I think she'd still be playing, and the records that some people currently have in the league would have been shattered.
I love it. I am all for that take. I know you asked Rachel at the end of every episode, do you have any inkling for what she thinks?
Yeah. So I think she's torn because she has like Cheryl Swoops or Cynthia Cooper that she grew up, or like Lisa Leslie that she grew up just like idolizing, or Sylvia Fowles is one of her favorite players of all time. I think because she sees such different facets of the game, it's hard for her. And I guarantee this, every time I ask her, she has a different player in mind, but she refuses to say it because she doesn't want to go, today it's this player, today it's this player, today it's this player. But one day I'm going to get her to commit and then call her out when she changes names the next week.
I love it. I listen to it at the end of every episode. Big supporter of Winsidr. Aryeh, I thank you so much for joining the show. The work that you guys do over at Winsidr is incredible. I appreciate you so much. So we bring you on for the Ted Lasso reference, the symbols, the metaphors, all of it, and for the power rankings that was way off from mine. But we had a lot of fun today. So thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for tuning into a pro basketball show. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Until next time, I am Andrew Willett. Thank you for tuning in.